Okay, so I've not used Screencastify before, so hopefully with this tutorial that we're working on here, I'll be able to get used to the program or the application a little bit, and at the same time, use this opportunity to review how to answer our questions for the rule of three, and in that way, make our answers a little bit more organized, and also to ensure that we include all of the required material in it to produce a quality answer. So here I have the criteria up, which will be posted along with this video that you can look at in more detail. So we have our 3 parts of our answer. So let's have a look here. So we have our introduction. Oh, look at that. So we have our introduction, which needs to have a topic sentence. So that topic sentence needs to restate part of the question and briefly include your position or opinion. So after reading this sentence, anyone should be able to figure out exactly what the question was. And people are going to know exactly what the question was because you restate part of the question. When it comes to our development, that is going to have 3 parts. So usually that'll be a first, second, third as introductory words to use for your sentences. But it really is 3 parts. You want 3 pieces of evidence. So this is going to be pulled directly from the text, either as a quote or paraphrase, including a page number, and that's going to try and prove that your topic sentence is true. Finally, we go to our conclusion, which is maybe the toughest part, and this is an explanation of your own opinion of how the evidence that you've provided in your development proves the topic sentence, or what you now know or wonder about the topic following the evidence that you provided. So you had your introduction, you made your case, you proved your case in your development, and now you're going to reach further with your conclusion after you've taken the time to prove that what you said in your introduction is true. So let's go ahead here and start with our introduction. So I have our question here. And so here we have, I'm just going to review the question that you've already answered. We have in chapter 6, we get the first glimpse of how society is starting to fall apart. So this is a statement of fact that in chapter 6, this is what we first start to really see that things are not going well. So the question is, how does the author Eric Walters use the mini-mart scene to introduce the reader to Herb's skillful handling of everyone in the community, including the mob, Adam's mother, and the grocery store manager? So here we have a couple of options. So the most important thing in our topic sentence is that we want it to be as short as we can make it, direct, and really pointed, so that we have a very clear target to try and hit in our development. So you might think of, excuse me, as the introduction or that topic sentence as being like you're making a target. So you're making a target and you want to make sure something like this. You're going to make a target. You want to make sure that that target is the right size. You don't want to make it so big. So you don't want a topic sentence that is so vague that the target is so big you can hit it, but it doesn't really say have a purpose. You also don't want your target to be so small that you can't hit it because you focused your topic sentence too much on one specific aspect or detail of the question. So let me see if I can explain this. So we have a couple of options. You might first write let me get my cursor back here. Here we go. In chapter 6, and if you want to include that first part up here, you can, with their society falling apart. we see how Eric Walters uses the mini mart scene to show us how Herb can bring order to a chaotic situation. So this is how you might compose a topic sentence. So you're restating, you're using part of the question that was already there. Let's see how this works. Oh, look at that. So you're restating that first part about society falling apart. That's right here. And it's important to indicate that what chapter we're talking about. So I'm able to do that right there. Now I go into the part of the actual question, and that's the question right here. So we see how Eric Walters uses the mini-mart scene to show us how Herb can bring order to a chaotic situation. So instead of adding the community, including the mob, Adam's mother, and the grocery store manager, I just summarized all of that as to what he's doing in each of those instances with the mob, with the mother, with the grocery store manager, that really he's taking something that is chaotic and bringing order to it. So that's one way to do it, and that creates a pretty big target because now we can talk about any of these things. We could even speak beyond the mob, the mother, and the manager because we didn't specify that that's who we're going to be talking about. Here's another way that we could write this topic sentence that's a little bit more direct. In chapter 6, with their society falling apart, we see how Eric Walters uses the mini mart scene to show us how Herb skillfully handles the mob, Adam's mother, and the grocery store manager. Okay, so with this one here, we have, it's a little bit longer, but we went ahead and have the same list that's posted right here. We include that down here too. So this has a way of making sure that in my development, my first thing that I'm going to talk about, so like that first sentence is going to talk about how Herb handles the mob. The second part of my development talks about how Herb handles Adam's mother. The third part of my development talks about how he handles the grocery store manager. This is also creating a target, which is quite pointed and direct, and I know exactly what I'm aiming at in my development. I'm going to hit the mob, the mother, and the manager. Those are the three things that I'm going to try and address in the development. Now, one of the things that I saw some people do in their topic sentence was something like this. In chapter 6, we see how Herb skillfully handles the mob, or skillfully handles everyone in the community like the mob, or such as the mob. So while we have everyone in the community here, there's the precision of the mob. This makes such a small target afterward because then the only things that you can speak about when you're trying to write your development is how he handles the mob. So you're excluding your ability to talk about Adam's mother and the grocery store manager, which isn't really the end of the world, except that in this instance, addressing Adam's mother and the grocery store manager is part of the question. So by having this as your topic sentence, you're cutting down 2/3 of the question that you're supposed to be answering. So you have to be really careful with that topic sentence that you include everything you need to talk about, but not more. So this is an example right here, right here of how you create a target that's too small to hit. So it's too small for the question being asked. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. And so we have either of these that we can use. Okay, let's look at another option here, which would be something like with society falling apart, we see how Herb skillfully handles everyone in the community. Okay, so this is a decent topic sentence. We talk about the society falling apart. We see the same thing up here, and how Herb skillfully handles everyone in the community, which is right here. Here, though, is an example of a target that is too big, because right now we're on chapter 6. This is then allowing you to go ahead and look at everything from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 6 as to how Herb is handling everyone in the community. We've left out in chapter 6, but more importantly, we left out the part of the mini mart scene. So that is so important to include, because then that limits us, that makes our target a little bit smaller, and we're only looking at the mini mart scene. So even though we're going to be looking at in chapter 6, and if I go ahead and open up the book and have a quick look, we see that chapter 6 is about 13 pages or so. So that's a lot to look through. But if we can go ahead and say, well, we're only looking at the mini mart scene, well, then we can go ahead and cut out the first part and say, then now we're only really looking at maybe 5 or 6 pages that we have to really sift through and look at for evidence. So we want to make sure, again, that our topic sentence that's creating our target doesn't create a target that is too big, like this one here, or too small, like what we just saw before. So we have a bit of a Goldilocks situation here with our target. So we don't want the porridge too hot or too cold. We want it just right. So here we have 2 topic sentences. This one here, or this one here. Either one is perfectly fine, depending on how you want to structure your answer. So let's go ahead and just keep one of them, or I guess we'll leave both for now. Okay, so I'm going to skip a line just to sort of space out what we're doing and move on to our development. So remember that our development is looking to prove our topic sentence. So we're either looking to prove, which is essentially the same thing, that Herb can bring order to a chaotic situation, or that Herb can handle, again, the mob, Adam's mother, the grocery store manager. So we always want to start, en français, on dit avec une marqueur de relation. Here, I've still got my spotlight here. We either want to use a transitional expression. So first, next, then, finally, however, therefore, for example, meanwhile. We could put secondly or thirdly in there as well. So that helps to identify or organize our 3 separate ideas. So it becomes really easy for the reader to see, okay, this is idea number 1. Okay, he's moving on to a new idea. Okay, he's moving on to a new idea, that kind of thing. So I'll begin with firstly. Herb is able to direct the mob in such a way that they, and here I have already taken a few minutes to look through the book to find my quotations that I'm going to use. I can also just paraphrase instead, but I still want to make sure that I have gone back to the text itself so that I can find not only the right information, but also ensure that I can include the page number. So here I have a direct quote. So firstly, Herb is able to direct the mob in such a way that they had become a group of obedient children. Quite the accomplishment. He does this by agreeing with them that they do have a right to food and water, as well as promising them that they will get it. So he promises to give them what they want, essentially. And what was the problem is that they need these things to survive. They're only really looking for material goods that they need, food, water, and probably a few extra things. The mother, when she first gets there, tries to calm them down and tells them to get out. And so that doesn't solve their problem. People who are hungry, people who are thirsty, need to eat, they need to drink. So Herb is able to calm them down by agreeing with them, yes, you have a right to food and water, and you are going to get it. Point final. So that is how he's able to do that. There's a little bit that we could add there if we wanted to, but we have to try and limit ourselves to try and keep our paragraph short. So yes, he does produce the voucher system. That would be a piece of evidence that you might be able to use. He also appeals to the humanity of the crowd by offering for older people and people with children to be at the front of the line. He also hands out the vouchers, ensuring that everybody is going to be able to get the exact same amount of things as well. So they're all going to get the same thing, whether they're in the front of the line or the back of the line, they're all going to get the same items. Okay, so moving on into the second one. So here we could use next or something like that. We can also just quite easily use secondly. So now we're moving on to how he handles Adam's mother. So he manages Adam's mother by whispering in her ear. And it's not stated in the text as to what he is whispering, but we can sort of infer that he is presumably asking for her permission to address the crowd. So despite her having so much experience dealing with these sorts of situations, being well more qualified in a sense than Adam's mother to take care of this whole situation, he still has the respect for her position as police chief to not step on her toes and to ask her first before he goes ahead and does this. She is, of course, relieved that he takes over because the situation was sort of beyond her ability to control. Okay, so let's use Grammarly here. I said, let's use Grammarly here. There we go. That worked. Okay, so this shows that he respects her authority as a police officer as the one who is really in charge of the situation. So even though she may not end up managing the situation, she is still the one who gives the okay or the no on the on how things play out. So next we move on to Herb managing the grocery store manager as per our topic sentence. So thirdly, Herb handles the manager. So I could repeat the grocery store manager, but I do already have that indicated up above here in my topic sentence. So it's sort of repetitious and redundant to repeat it. We want to try as much as we can because we're working with a pretty confined space of maybe 5 to 7 sentences, ideally. It could go a little bit beyond, but really we want to try and limit it to 7 as a maximum. That any extra words that we can take out because they're just repeating themselves and we don't lose our comprehension or understanding of who we're talking about, what we're talking about, then we definitely want to go ahead and omit those words if we can. So here we have, thirdly, Herb handles the manager by leading him to reason that he has the choice between losing his store to a riot or else recouping money on perishable items that would soon spoil anyway. And that's on page 63. Now, this is a paraphrase. Again, Grammarly. Perfect. This is a paraphrase. It's not a direct quote of what takes place in the book. What takes place in the book is Herb, after Ernie goes ahead and says, I guess it is sort of like an IOU, Herb goes and says, you're also only going to allow them to purchase selected items. Look around the store. With the electricity out, there's a lot of food that's going to go bad today, otherwise going to spoil. So he convinces him that, well, the promise of money is better than no money at all. And on the other hand, you've got a riot on your hands. Your store is going to be completely looted, probably destroyed. So take the best of make the best of a bad situation, and at least get something. Of course, some of you mentioned as well that Herb convinces him that he'll also be remembered once the power comes back on, and he'll be regarded as a hero, and people will be loyal to his store. All of these sorts of things that appeals to his sense of pride or ego. Who doesn't want to be a hero, for instance? And so this is an opportunity for Ernie to be, how would you say, seen in a much more positive light by the community, despite what's going on. So here we have our development. Now, this is a little bit long because for my first reason with the mob, I have 2 sentences. Then for my second piece in my development about Adam's mother, I have 2 sentences. So that's 4 already. Then here, third, with the manager, I have a 5th sentence. So that's 5 already. If I have my 1 sentence in my introduction, I have 1 sentence for my conclusion. That would be 7 in total. So one of the things that I want to highlight here in the development, and that some of you did a great job in identifying sort of what Herb does, but had a bit of a harder time indicating how. So for instance, some of you mentioned that Herb did a great job, for instance, in calming down the crowd. So that's the sort of what happened, but didn't indicate what he did to do that. So we might have Herb is able to direct the mob in such a way that they had become a group of obedient children. So great. We know the outcome. We know what happens as a result of Herb addressing the crowd, but we don't know how that happened. And that's where this sentence is so important, because it's showing how he actually accomplishes getting the crowd to behave like obedient children. So the next one, maybe we have how Herb handles the manager is, you might say by calming him down or by developing an IOU system, handing out the vouchers. Those sorts of things work really more for the mob than for Ernie. What he does for Ernie is really leads him to reason, uses logic to show him, hey, you're going to lose everything. So we better compromise and negotiate here, and at least you can get something rather than nothing. So we really want to make sure in our development that we are focusing not just on the what, but on the how. And all of this, if we look back on it, points back to our introductory sentence. So our introductory sentence talks about how either Herb brings order to a chaotic situation, or to state it another way, how he handles the mob. And that's this part right here. So that points right back to that topic sentence. How he handles Adam's mother. Again, that points right back to our topic sentence. And third, how he handles the store manager, which then goes right back to our topic sentence. Okay, now for our conclusion. Now, our conclusion, if you remember, is really trying to reach beyond. And the conclusion is probably the hardest part in some ways of the short answer question, because we want to restate what it was that our topic was about, while at the same time providing something new. So either something that we now know as a result of our development of the information provided, or something that we might wonder about that may happen in the future in the book, or how this information perhaps sheds light on something else that came up earlier in the book, or sheds light on something that or foreshadows something that may occur later in the book or may become useful. It can be a little bit tricky, but let's see what we can do here. So to reach a little bit further. So here we've been looking at the mini-mart scene. So we've really confined our study of Herb and how he handles himself, or the skills that he possesses in this specific situation. But we're only in chapter 6. So we know that this is going, that the book is not done. Herb is establishing himself as one of the main characters. We're going to see him again. So one can then start to think, this is surely not the last bit of chaos that we're seeing, nor is it the last of Herb. So I wonder how the skills that he shows here are going to play out later in the book. And so that would then be my concluding sentence, that I'm really wondering about what the skill set is going to provide, not only, let's say, is going to provide as the community or as things continue to degenerate in the society. So in conclusion, and you could use finally or in closing, but you want to have something there, genre de marqueur de relation, that really indicates this is the end. So in conclusion, in this scene, we see a fine display of Herb's ability to negotiate a compromise and to calm down a chaotic situation. So I have restated part of, in conclusion, in this scene. Yeah, it reads better with a comma. So we see a little half pause there in reading would be preferable. So in conclusion, in this scene, we see a fine display of Herb's ability to negotiate a compromise and to calm down a chaotic situation. So here, say I use this sentence here for my topic sentence. This isn't lost with the chaotic situation because I'm restating the topic a little bit differently, so it's not exactly a repetition. And now I'm going to add my part that's new. Surely skills that will come in handy in the chapters to come. Okay, so quite simply, I'm just trying to indicate that, well, this is a pretty, he handled this situation really well, and you know what? I bet there's more to come, and it'll probably get worse. And so I'm really curious to see how he is able to use this skill set in these other situations. Okay, one of the things that we see in our conclusion oftentimes is only the first part. So we do a good job sometimes of summing up what it was that we spoke about, but we don't add that new component. So I really want you to try and think about adding that little bit of something new. So again, that's something that you're wondering about, that you can broaden, look more big picture to how what you were looking at or studying can be applied to the book at large, or something that you may learn or really be curious about, I guess, for the book as we progress in our reading. So it's really looking about trying to go further in light of the information that you've been able to pull out. So to put this all together, because we want a paragraph, not three separate things. So we've got that. We don't need this anymore, but we were able to use the chaotic situation part in our conclusion, which is nice. Okay, so that would be my answer. Now, if we go and look at it, it's long enough because it's a full 7 sentences. And some of these sentences are a little bit complex, using, like for instance, in the conclusion, using the extra comma to extend my sentence a little bit. But note that I'm still speaking about the same subject. So it does not become a run-on sentence, and it really is just on the cusp there of being 2 lines typed. So half a line plus a full line plus another half line is 2 is 2 in total. If it starts getting longer than that, then I have to worry that I might have a run-on sentence and have to split it up into 2. But right here, I've got 7 sentences, which is right on the outer limit, and probably about as long as we want our answer to get. Surely I could have added other information, and you may have substituted, you may not have included all of this. You may have used some other information, like the how Herb was treating the crowd, or he was like a magician. That was a good piece of evidence there. You could talk about Ernie and the IOUs or the vouchers to deal with the mob, and the numbered tickets from the deli that Herb used in order to calm them down by getting them into a line. You could have spoken about how he appealed to their good side. This isn't the kind of thing, or you're not the kind of people that would do this, that sort of thing. But in the end, this is about what we're looking for. So some of you may have answers that are a little bit too short, which is probably because you're missing some of the how that I've included in the development. Some of you have answers that are probably about twice as long as this one. And so I mentioned that you need to be a little bit more discerning. So that means you need to really pick what is the most important information that will prove your point, and cut out the rest. So you'll see here how there were other pieces of information that I could have included, but I had to decide what to include and what to exclude in order to stay within the length that was required. So anyway, that's it. Hopefully this has proved helpful to you. I'm looking forward to getting a little bit of feedback on this, and perhaps using this application again in the future, either for another sort of little workshop as to how to do a little writing task or something like that, or possibly for something else as the need may arise. So hopefully this was helpful, and good luck on your next question.